We all have had that what if we knew about this years ago? What if the real issue wasn't time, but it was readiness? I was in a class for church around finances, and let's just say it blew my mind with what my pastor was talking about. And I couldn't help it but let my mind go to that place of, man, all the things I could have done. I was one of those people who, the more money I made, I would just keep my money in my checkings account and I wouldn't do anything with it. I would just get overwhelmed and just leave it in there. There was a part of me that was telling myself, man, if I knew this 7 years ago, I would have been way ahead. It makes me chuckle a bit because how we think and imagine another scenario. Like, if we can change the past, well, if I knew about this, I would have done this. Slow down there, sugar. We're thinking about it from a place of our present self. If you knew about that very thing that you know now, would you have done it? But the truth is, if we knew about the very things that we knew now, back then, I don't think we would have done it. Hence why you didn't do it back then. And you're just learning about it now. And this is the place where I believe that everything is about timing. You weren't ready for it because you were in a different place back then. In that life, you were a different person. The person you are now wasn't the same person 5 or 10 years ago. Your younger self wouldn't be able to comprehend and wrap their mind about what you know right now and what you would have done on this present moment. This is your permission for today and reminder that we are going to stop reminiscing on the past and we're no longer beating ourselves up for not doing the things that we didn't do back then that we think as of now we should have done. There was a moment where I was going down that spiral of telling myself, man, I wasted those years, even though the truth was, I didn't really waste it because I was learning a lot of skills and stuff, but that's what I was telling myself because we're so harsh on ourselves. I wasted those years in my 20s and when I was like making money, not to say I didn't save, I felt like I wasted that time because I didn't know those skills back then. I didn't know the skills that I was learning now of what I could have done with my finances. I only knew to save, pay that, and that was it. And I was kind of telling my past self, and I'm like, you should have known this. But then I was like, but wait, like in my 20s, I was trying to conquer a whole different giant than what I'm trying to conquer now. I was trying to survive. I was trying to navigate in this world while not feeling loved and while not feeling supported and while feeling abandoned. That's a whole different ballgame. I was trying to learn how to love myself. I didn't believe that I can achieve the best of the best. So what I did back then makes a lot of sense. How I would just keep my money in my checkings and I would just save and did what I felt like I needed to do because that was relevant for that time. 10 years ago, I didn't know how I fit into this life. I didn't feel like I had any talents, at least the typical ones that everyone can see. I felt like I was bottom of the barrel. I didn't believe I was truly going to make it. With the way life was and the life that was served at me, I would almost say I was not kissing life and I was not giving it big hugs. And I was just trying to take my day by day. I was trying to live till the next day and walk it through. And I'm sharing this because sometimes we forget where we were back then and we get it all mixed up and we start measuring where we are and that we start thinking and beating ourselves up and saying, well, if I knew this, I would have done that. But the truth is, you probably wouldn't because you were in a different place back then and you were dealing with different things back then and you probably didn't have the amount of confidence and resilience that you do now because those very things is what you needed to go through for you to be standing here right now. And we forget that because the natural thing is to compare and be like, oh man, I wish I knew this, and to compare what we're not happy with where we are right now and compare it to back then, be like, if I knew this back then. But it's a lie because if you knew back then, it probably would have been overwhelming or you probably would have been like, I don't know if that's for me. But there's somewhere along the road because you went through the very things and because you didn't know it, you were able to learn lessons that made you who you are today, made you stronger, made you more resilient, made you be able to overcome challenges better, and I'm sure the list can go on. I'm here to tell you, bestie, it's okay that you're ready to start whatever you need to start right now in this very moment. Right now, in this present, you know exactly what you need to know right now, because we can't change the past. That will just hold you back. You can only think about the present and change the future. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that time is wasted. It's never wasted, especially if it means that there was learning moments and there's things that you needed to overcome. There was giants that you needed to beat down. The fact that you're here means that there was a giant that you overcame that felt like a giant back then. The enemy is a liar, because the biggest thing that he would taunt you with is telling you, oh, you waste time, or you should have done this. And he's like beating you on the head saying, you should have known this at that age. But it's a lie. It's just easier to get taunted by time because it's the one thing that you can't change. No one can change time. We can only change our action. It's counterproductive to be beating yourself over time wasted. And that was the biggest thing that taught me for years, because of how my life went. I was trying to figure things out. I didn't have the regular support of most people. So I got everything later. So every time that voice would be like, you know what? You know, you wasted your time. But really, it was not true, because I felt like everything happened in good timing. From the time I got laid off to when I started my business at 24. Everything was in perfect timing, because it was exactly what I needed at the time that made me who I am right now. And you have to believe that. If you're beating yourself up over time wasted, stop it. And put things into perspective of where you were back then. My worries years ago is not the same worries like right now. Don't get caught up feeling like you shouldn't be where you are right now. You're exactly where you need to be. It's the biggest lie. It's the biggest lie. You're exactly where you need to be. You know what exactly you need to know. You know what you need to do right now. You're exactly where you need to be. There's no way that in the past where you were, you'd be thinking of the future. Past life wasn't worrying about where you are in the present right now. So your present self shouldn't be worrying about the past life, because you went through it, you overcame it, it's done. You're in the present. Where you are now is exactly what you can handle. The giants you have now is exactly what you can handle. There's some things I went through myself 5 years ago wouldn't have been able to handle. There was a time where I was having dreams, so this was probably a few months ago. I was having dreams, continuous dreams, about my mom abandoning me over and over. And I had this dream consecutively, 3 nights in a row. Every time I would get up, I would think about the dream and I'm like, huh. And then I'd go about my day. And I remember going to my pastor and I was like, what does this dream mean? And then he looked at me. The number 3 is very significant in the Bible. It usually means like, it's done, it's finished. My pastor brought up a good point, and they were like, if you had those dreams years ago, you probably would have been traumatized by that. Your whole day would have probably been messed up. You would have been feeling that feeling of abandonment all over again. But look how much you grew. Is that you had those dreams and you thought about it for like 2 minutes, and then you went on about your day, and then you would analyze it, but you're just like, okay, I got a dream, and so what? I would have never done that years ago. And it showed me that I grew. Over time, I've healed. It's not beneficial to think like, well, I'm not happy with where I am right now. And I feel like that's the constant thing that most people feel. And it's important to recognize the things that you've accomplished from the past and where you are right now, because sometimes we forget how far we've come. We forget all those giants that we had back then, that now if we had those giants, we'd be like, get out of here, okay? I don't have time for this. And that's a good feeling. We have to recognize what we have overcome. I look back about 7-10 years ago, and I love the mindset that little Nikia had. I love how I had the mindset of just being in the present and trying to take it day by day because it worked. And I have to admit, back then, it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like I was enjoying the present. But now I look back, I wasn't worrying about the future. I wasn't worrying about the past. I was just trying to pay my rent. I'm trying to deal with what life is giving me right now. I'm trying to deal with what I have right now and what I can handle and use the resources that I currently have right now. And that's something I'm trying to practice today, because I've grown so much. I have to admit, sometimes my mind is so far down in the future, and I've gotten better. And that's how you get anxiety. You start to worry. And now I try to practice that. Just being in the present, not worrying about what's going to happen 5-10 years down the line or even next month. and saying, okay, what am I doing today? And then take it one step at a time. Because sometimes, as you overcome these battles, you sometimes forget that the present is always the best, and there's always something beautiful. It's always a new day the following day. We don't have to worry about that. We just have to worry about today. It's like every time we're beating our younger selves for what we didn't know that we know now. It's like we're telling our younger selves, hey, like what you did wasn't enough. You should have known more. And we're not doing that. I love my younger self back then because I love how strong and resilient I was. Despite all the things that were going on, I kept going. I remember I was just sewing and I was looking for jobs and I was taking things one day at a time. I would walk blocks with my dirty laundry to go wash it at a laundromat. I love that mindset. I did not give up. And we have to remember to thank ourselves back then. And say, thank you for being strong. Thank you for being resilient and not give up. Because if you gave up back then, you probably wouldn't be here. And so there has to be some type of thanks and some appreciation and gratitude for what your younger self did back then. Even when life was hard, I appreciate her for choosing to live. What are you appreciating that your younger self did back then? Because you probably did exactly what was needed for your present self right now. You probably did exactly what was needed for your future self, your present self right now. So be kind to her. She did exactly what was needed at the time. There's nothing that could have been changed. There's nothing that you needed to know more of. You knew exactly enough to get you to where you are today. There's nothing that you could have done better. There's nothing. So every time your mind went to go back there, like how it came back to me and it was trying to get me down and tell me, man, you should have known this 7 years ago. I would tell myself, no, I didn't need to know that 7 years ago. I did what exactly I needed to do back then based on the things that I was going through and I needed to overcome and the things that I needed to grow into. And always remember that tomorrow is a new day. The beauty of tomorrow is you can always move forward. The beauty of being in the present is just appreciating where you were back then and where you're about to go.